Hello, America, and to our friends around the world, welcome to the Common Sense Show. We are the show that is freeing America, one enslaved mind at a time. People ask me my motivation. No, it's really twofold. We serve God, family, country, primarily emphasis on God, and we hope that we can make people more aware, more spiritually aware, and they'll pursue a path, conversion, the Great Commission. They'll pursue a path that's good for them and good for everybody else. The other thing that we are trying to do here is make our time on this earth more livable. And we absolutely need an overhaul in our government. Not everybody, but a lot. And we need to overhaul, we need to establish some common sense rules. In other words, stick to the Constitution. I think Romans 13, which says when the leaders tell you to do something, you should do it, render under Caesar what is Caesar. But the other thing I would say to you is that when the leaders don't follow the instructions of the government, the Constitution, they're guilty of not following Romans 13 too. And then you have to wonder, well, then would our intellectual, spiritual, and maybe financial rebellion be justified? Well, particularly when they violate the laws of God, yes. There's no question. But we never advocate for violence. Self-defense is a different matter. And I think you could tell by my position on the war where we came down on that. Now, we need major reforms. I still believe this is the best nation on the face of the earth, but we are increasingly more wicked than we have been. If you want to just do an example, and I've kind of done my own laboratory, watch my three sons. You can find it on these old stations that run the reruns, and Leave It to Beaver, both set in the 60s, early 60s. Go to the sitcoms today. You see no sexual innuendos in those. You see no blatant affairs. You see no drug use. You don't see terrible violence. But today's entertainment that the kids can watch, they see unbelievable lewd behaviors, certainly immoral, and stuff that we used to ban. And I wonder, why do we even bother with the ratings? G, GP, R, X. Those used to mean something. They don't anymore. And it's concerning. So that's what motivates us here. And we have lost our compassion in large part as a nation. We used to identify as a Christian nation, and Obama said it very clearly when he said, America is no longer a Christian nation. You look it up. He said it. I think that was his desire, but we have diminished in our faith. Now, we are beginning to see a little bit of a resurgence in young people. Um, my pastor thinks we're going through the beginning stages of a revival. I'm not sure. I hope he's right. And I pray that he is. And he may have that insight that I'm not yet seeing. And I hope he is correct because we desperately need it. But we've lost our compassion. The one thing about my faith that is unique from every other faith is that when you truly repent, God gets amnesia for what you've done wrong. It's hard to get my mind around it because I used to have these terrible feelings of guilt. And sometimes I still do. And I go, wait a minute, wait a minute. God's not remembering. You shouldn't either. But we don't give people in our country the same second chances. Now, there are some people that need to be locked up and the key needs to be thrown away. And I agree with that for the safety of everybody else. But when we're looking at what almost are petty offenses, we wreck people's lives in this country. And our prison system, which is the focus of what we're going to talk about, is it's the worst in the first world of nations. It's one of the worst in the world. Now, we don't torture, but we've altered our criminal justice system to we have something that has more effectively replaced torture till you get a confession. We're going to talk about all that right here on the Common Sense Show. You know who I am, Dave Hodges. I'm the host. We're glad to be with you. We are brought to you by something that you hear me talk a lot about, and it's the Nanosoma Starter Pack. And you know this saved my life. Dave, you got strip lung linings. They're not coming back. Two experts, well-meaning, competent, good guys, people worthy of their patients' trust. Fortunately for me, they were wrong, but they didn't know I was going to encounter something like the nanosoma liquid spray. It boosts your immune system to unbelievable levels. Doesn't cure anything, but the effect on your immune system is unbelievable. Over 30 research studies. Then you've got the gel. Rub it on your joints because I started to get back in the gym when I recovered. The old inflammation, arthritis, joint pain, that all resurfaced. At about the 6 week mark of using this, I found, hey, I'm feeling pretty good. At the 8 week mark, I felt like I had no restrictions. Then, of course, there's the skin cream. Together, it's the starter pack. 15% off. 15% off. Act now because these are flying off the shelf. I can't believe how fast this product's moving. People are getting it. I get thank you notes. Thanks, Dave. This has been awesome. Go to iwantmyhealthback.com/Dave Hodges. iwantmyhealthback.com/Dave Hodges. Let me give you some statistics here that should bother you about our prison system, and then we'll do a comparison with the highest incarcerated nations in the world and where we stand in that, and how we compare to our first world, most of them allies. All right, here we go. We only have 5% of the world's population, but we have 25% of the incarcerated world's population. That'll become clear as we go through this. Right now, among them, we have 425,000 pretrial detentions. Now, I do grant you, someone has committed a heinous act. We don't want to let them out. We need to set the bond so high they can't make it. But what we are also doing is keeping people for petty offenses in prison because the bond is set at an unreasonable amount for petty offenses. And for you people who say, well, they shouldn't have done the crime. Well, you're paying for these pretrial detentions. And we've seen cases where they've gone on in places like LA for 2 years. 2 years without ever having been charged. We actually covered a case like that last year. We're supposed to be a civilized, compassionate nation. This is anything but civilized and compassionate. I want you to listen to this stat when you go to trial. The acquittal rates. In 2024, 72,000 indictments were delivered federally. 290 achieved acquittal. Wow. Is our system that good? We make such few mistakes, or is there something else at work? Remember, I said we don't beat people into confession like a lot of nations, third world nations mostly. What we do then is we pile charges upon charges upon charges. You're arrested for the crime and then they find 5 other charges. You're facing 50 years. The rest of your life, you're going to be in prison. But if you plead to this, we'll just give you 10 years. And if you're nice, we might let you out in 5. And it's a coercive system because the people, a lot of them can't afford a lawyer. Public defenders are aptly called pretenders. And it's not that they're bad, but have you ever seen the caseload for this? You ever looked into this? They might have a caseload of over 100 clients. They have nothing that they can do with their time other than plea bargain. They don't have time for a trial. I was actually involved in trying to help someone who was charged with a serious offense. I didn't think they were guilty. And there was the attorney that I had just hired for them, and there was the public pretender. The attorney that we just hired said, "We can beat this." The public pretender says, he'll do the full sentence and this is not going to end up good. We need a plea bargain. Classic. Classic. And this is why we have such a huge prison population. Now, I think in America, we've made yeoman strides in treating everybody equally under the law. We have. I mean, it's embarrassing that America ever had slavery. It is embarrassing. Some great Americans owned slaves, great Americans in terms of what they passed down governmentally. And I'm talking some of our founding fathers, namely, Jefferson and Washington. But we've made progress, right? We had the Civil Rights Movement. We had the great Martin Luther King. We had the Civil Rights Act of 1964. We got the EEOC, the Office of Civil Rights. We go to pretty strong lengths to make sure that people aren't denied employment or fired or denied admission to something because of their race or religion or age. We're probably the best in the world at this, except in our criminal justice system. 70% are Black. Now, perhaps the majority of the 70% have committed crimes and deserve to be where they're at, but we recycle based on poverty. We label, they can't get jobs, they revert to old behaviors, people go back to prison, and this is true for any race, not just Black people. But it's embarrassing that we have this stat hanging out because what's wrong with our society where 70% of a certain group of human beings across broad cross sections would have similar genetics, similar intelligence, similar abilities spread out across the population. How is this possible? Especially when they're not the majority race. Or number three, the criminal justice system, whether it means to be or not, is a racially prejudiced system. But also, you can put the blame on what we're not doing for people as they're growing up. Why aren't we providing more opportunities? And there has been some lip service paid to this. The Head Start program, for example, okay, pre-K in schools. I get all this, okay? And those are noble efforts. Some of them fell short, but they're noble efforts, but they're not working. And if we don't want to have the world's largest incarcerated rate, actually we're fifth. There's four nations that are ahead of us, and you don't want to be one of those four. But if you don't want to be the number one first world nation and actually have more prisoners than the top nine combined, then we need to start correcting things on the front end of when people get into trouble. And a lot of it's petty trouble. And I mean petty, but they don't have a good lawyer to defend themselves. Oftentimes they get maximum punishment. And then when they're in prison, they're enslaved. Oh, yeah, the prison labor. We've covered that. Fortune 500 companies getting the benefit of prison labor at pennies on the hour. And if in these privatized prisons, they're horrendous. They should be illegal. But they take advantage of these people rather than teaching them useful skills and education so they can maybe get out and do something. Yeah, this the whole system. But anyway, I'm going to give you some stats here. And this is really, really concerning because when we look at ourselves compared to the rest of the world, we are an embarrassment. And I'm having trouble bringing up those stats right now. Um, as I said earlier, we are fifth. Well, I made positive use of AI. And I actually interacted and broke some of the stats down. But I'm going to give you the basics here. First of all, we hear a lot that we're number one in the world, percentage of population incarcerated. Well, I'm going to give you another stat that's really bad. One in three Americans will have a criminal record. You think that helps the employment and standard of living for that family? Um, and some of it's petty, but it follows them. Okay, so we have about 542 people incarcerated for every 100,000. That puts our incarceration rate at just over a 0.5%. It's quite a bit. You look at El Salvador, they're number one, but we know they jailed all these people for being gang affiliated. And so I kind of throw that out. Cuba's a repressive regime. You just blink sideways and they think it's disrespect to Castro or any of his people. Well, okay, you're going. Rwanda, we know their history. Okay, do you see how bad this is? Uh, Turkmenistan, just barely above the United States. So the nations that have higher incarcerated percentage rates are horrendous. Now, I don't really put El Salvador in that. They're trying to clean up their act, but they had a big hurdle, take them out. But Cuba, Rwanda, are you kidding me? We're in that neighborhood with our incarceration rates. Um, let's come down to here. Look at this stat here. One in every 185 Americans are behind bars. That's amazing. Now let's look at the 10 developed nations. We are nowhere near there. All 10 nations. Look at this. The US rate compared to our first world allies, we are 4 to 15 times higher than typical Western European countries, Japan, and Canada. Have higher incarceration rates than Australia and the UK. This is unacceptable in a society like this where we're supposed to be the land of opportunity. The opportunity is so good. Why are there so many people in prison? Well, this is what it comes down to. First of all, the criminal justice system, I think there should be a limit placed on plea bargains because that's basically they've been piling charges on. That's how they get people to plead out. Over 90% of the cases are pled out. And you saw the exoneration rate, those that are get acquitted, it's astronomically low. So when we look at this, what does this tell you? Land of opportunity. We still have a lot of wealth in our nation, but we have one in three people that have a criminal record, and a lot of those crimes are economically related. So what does that tell you? That tells you that we've had wealth redistribution that's still going on. The money is leaving the middle class. And I'll give you an ancillary statistic that I've talked about before that really exemplifies this. 65% of Americans cannot afford a $400 car repair bill. That's a minor repair. 65%. What's that say about the middle class? It's being vaporized. And it shows up in high crime rates. Remember, one in three will have a criminal record. So what do we have to do? Well, we got to get the oligarchs under control. And I'm not a socialist, but we need to enforce our antitrust legislation. I'll just give you one example. BlackRock, Vanguard, and State Street interlocked. Okay. It's hard to tell one where one begins and the other ends. Together, they control 90% of all equity asset management in America, 70% worldwide. That is a horrendous antitrust action waiting to happen, but it's not because they buy influence. And you got the seven sisters of oil. You know, if one oil company sneezes and the price goes up 10 cents a gallon, so do the other six. They move in unison. There's literally no competition. That's antitrust. So the monopolies need to be broken up and competition standards must be enforced. But we're not because we have the wrong electoral system. And as we talked about in our last segment with Sarah Westall, what did I say on there? I said, number one, we need to outlaw all corporate campaign donations, period. Have publicly funded campaigns. They don't go over 6 weeks. Every candidate who qualifies gets the same amount of money. They're limited on how much radio, TV, and print ads they can take out, and it's all equal. And the corporations need to sit on the side and twiddle their thumbs. That's how you start to remove this problem. Now, government has to be responsive to the people, not just every 2 or 4 years, but every single day. It's not a hard solution. And then I got into also, too, we need to control our elections. That's another topic for another time, but just very quickly, same day voting, paper ballots, same day counting. Florida can do it in 2 hours, so can we. I don't think we should be using machines. Just ask Tina Peters, look at that case, and that really shows you why. Look at Maricopa County in 2022. Yeah, what happened there? The public record, 56% of the machines in heavily Republican districts went down upon opening when they were supposed to have been checked out within 72 hours prior to opening, and they weren't. It's hard to not be a conspiracy theorist when you look at this. So these are reforms that need to happen, and I just touched the surface there. But here's the reality. We live in now a have and have not society, and the have-nots run a real high risk of going to prison. And now there's talk about if you speak against Netanyahu and the war effort when that was going on, okay, well, gee, we want to have anti-Semitic laws against you. Well, of course, we don't want to allow people to persecute someone because of their race or religion, but to have laws that they're talking about passing to limit your free speech about political actions, this will just create another criminal class. We're losing our First Amendment in many, many ways, and they're criminalizing it. In fact, what did we see? A Facebook post, millions have seen this, so I'm sure a lot of you have seen this. Man organized a protest on a public street and sent an email, non-threatening, to the person behind, a politician behind allowing the data centers to come in. And these people who organized the protest felt this was dangerous to the environment, detrimental to lifestyle, utility bills, water availability. And they said, we got to stop it. The police showed up at the guy's house and arrested him for stalking, harassment, and they made him felonies. What's that say about First Amendment right to criticize your leaders when they're not acting in your best? You get the idea. Are you ready to stand up and do something? Go back to the last segment and listen to what I said would bring the corporate oligarchs to their knees. And it's not violence. It's consumer choice. And really, we should thank the Canadian truckers, brave beyond belief, when they stood up to Trudeau and a criminal government. And they just said, no, we're not going to do this. Now, they paid a heavy price, although later it was undone by the courts. But Trudeau showed his tyrannical ways. So we should be contemplating the same kinds of actions. Nothing illegal, just bring them to their knees, force political reforms I talked about, and start to make government responsive to you. And maybe we wouldn't see these high incarceration rates. And the other thing that needs to happen is this: for-profit prisons that are private, they need to be gone. All prisons need to be run and maintained by the state. Because when you privatize it, this is where you get into what I refer to as slave labor at the benefit of many Fortune 500 companies. Some of the products you buy in stores, like Target, they were made in prison on labor where they're paying 5, 8 cents an hour. Oh, and if you don't conform and do what they want to the standard they want, they lengthen your sentence. I don't know how privatized prison can really increase a judicial judgment against someone where the judge enforces, but this is happening in our prison systems. And we are in great need of reform. And what they really are is symbolic. Now, I'll conclude with this. We covered that Utah had opened up prison, huge prison, for homeless. They criminalized being homeless, like the wealth transfer that's gone on, that's made many people homeless, not by their choice, not by their drug use, not by their neglect or their laziness, but because of economic circumstances where the wealth is flowing up. We're criminalizing that, and they're saying, well, if you get caught sleeping in your car, it's $1,000 fine. Second offense, it's 5,000. And people, if they had 1,000 or 5,000, they wouldn't be homeless, right? They wouldn't be sleeping in their car. So what do? They go to prison. And 8 states are passing legislation along these lines. This is abusive. And to me, as a Christian, this just goes against everything I believe in. Where's the golden rule on all this? There is none. It's exploitive. And it's designed to profit the people where the profits are going to right now. And we need to call a halt to it because a lot of people say it's not affecting me. And I'll say this: well, it's affecting your bottom line with the taxes you're paying. That's unmistakable. The other thing is too, is it's creating more desperate people who get out of prison. Now they're labeled with a criminal record and they can't get a job. Okay, I could keep going down this path. And I've actually had people say this to me when I used to work with people at basically what was a halfway house inpatient facility. And they'd say, okay, I'm going to do all these things I'm supposed to do for 6 months and I'm going to get probation. But Dave, where the heck am I going to get a job? I'm labeled. That's another problem we need to deal with as well. We have a lot we got to fix in this country if we're going to maintain what we are. Or do we want to become like the rest of the world? You know what they say? My mama used to say this to me. You become like the people you hang out with. My dad, being an old Navy guy, was a little more flamboyant. He used to say, if you roll and poop, or words of that effect, you start to stink. Well, right now, the United States is lowering its standards of behavior, moral, ethically, to such a level that we're rolling with the poop of the world, and it's not what we want. We are better than that. We should be setting the standard for the world to emulate, not being like them. I'm Dave Hodges. This is the Common Sense Show.